Okay, so we are going to begin the Nantucket Conservation Commission meeting for Monday, December 16th. I'd like to remind everybody to please put your cell phones on silent. If you need to have conversation, please take it outside because it's very hard to hear in this room. And if you need to address the commission, please come up, clearly state your name, and speak into one of the two microphones we have so that you're picked up on the audio-video recording. And with that, we will begin public comment on items not being heard today.
While the applicants are fighting over who is going to come up to the front, I'll add in while Rick is on his way up, I'd also like to remind everyone that comes to the table, especially since you're facing the commission, to speak loudly enough for those who are also behind you to hear, because occasionally we get comments that people that are facing the wrong way are tough to hear, and we even talked today with Deanne herself about maybe flipping the room kind of around, but then the commissioners would be facing away from people. So there's unfortunately not a really good way, and these microphones don't go through the speaker system here. So if people could be sure to use their good outside voice when they're sitting at the table, and try to speak slowly and clearly for everyone to hear, that would be greatly appreciated, and will save us some phone calls of complaint for sure. Not to steal your public comment if that's what it was going to be. But
Thank you.
So my name's Rick Atherton. To the chair, this is a comment about the other core lots south of the geotube that we've had some conversations about. And if you think that's related to what you're up to, I'd be happy to come back then or distribute what's on my mind right now, as you wish. It's somewhat related because it involves whether you're going to have to remediate for some of those projects as well.
Yeah, I think it's a separate issue.
Okay.
Jeff.
Well, let me just start then. I think the first indication that we had an issue about deliveries and whether they contained, rubble or bricks and other things, I think came with that delivery in June, and it was one delivery at that time. And after that, Jeff Carlson was kind enough, and I'll hand each, and I'm dealing with publicly available documents, that's all I have. And Jeff went to the Board of Selectmen about that delivery and made a report to them in writing and spoke to them in July. And attached to his memo was a map.
Rick, can I get one more?
Yep, I'm down at the end, and I have one for
Thank you, sir.
Steve. Who wants one? It's a lot. Thank you. So at that time, Jeff, the first 2 pages are related to that public discussion, and page 2 highlights 65 Baxter Road. So while the memo doesn't specifically say 65 Baxter Road was to be the end point for that delivery, one might come to that conclusion from the fact that 65 is highlighted. The third page in your package, and again, all these are public documents, there may be others more recent, is from a memo written in 2015. And that's at a time when the then Board of Selectmen was asking for a listing of all the projects, private projects on town-owned property. And Mr. Carlson put this together. He references specifically, for example, the order of condition, the DEP number, I guess it is, SE 48-1659. But on the next page, he makes a list. And all the projects that had private construction, be they stairs or core or any other issue that involved the public property, are listed on the next page. For example, you'll see that there's no listing, I don't expect you to go through this now, for 65 Baxter Road. And there's no listing for core logs for 59 through 69, which by observation these days, we believe there are core logs on those, in front of those lots as well. And presumably those core lots are at the base of the bluff and probably on town-owned property, but I'm not opining on that here. The next, the public documents available for these same lots, there are two sets of them. There's the first page of a license agreement for properties. This is with the town of Nantucket as the property owner. And I think the commissioners and Mr. Carlson are obviously interested in making sure any project you approve is properly authorized. So in addition to having a proper order of conditions, you want to make sure the owner of the property has issued, in this case, it's via a license. So the first one is a license agreement entered into in 2008, and it covers SE 681602, and the property is located between specifically 65 and 75 Baxter Road, and the license is issued to the Sconset Beach Preservation Fund. On the next page is the first page of the relevant order of conditions issued at that time, and it refers to the same Mass DEP number and refers to the same properties down at the bottom, 65-71. So that actually 71 instead of 70, what did I say before?
75.
75, yeah. So there's a little distinction there, but it's picked up by the reference to the order number. And the next license agreement that I'm aware of, other than the current Geotube license, was issued also in 2008 to the Sconset Beach Preservation Fund, and it covers parcels between 77 and 122, number 481659, and the next page is the first page of the relevant order of conditions. Again, the same number, and it on that page actually it covers properties from 11 to 122. It seems like everything from Codfish Park all the way north to 122 Baxter Road. And the next documents are just the letter from the attorney to the Board of Selectmen, where the discussion and the approval of these licenses took place back in 2008, just for reference. Again, there may be more current orders of condition for those lots south of the geotubes that have been referenced as receiving this material, controlled by others. I don't have access to them. If there are, I would hope we would all see them shortly, so we would be absolutely clear about to whom those orders were issued. And if they're on town property, I assume you would have access to the appropriate license under the same terms and conditions, which may be different from the ones I've been able to find readily available on the town website. So, thank you.
Thank you.
I think we're happy to put together an update for
For the
all of
license.
that, and for licensing, and get that to you guys.
Okay. Yeah, that would
Probably
be
not for
great.
this Wednesday's meeting, but probably for the 8th.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I would expect. Great. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Deanne Atherton for the Nantucket Coastal Conservancy. We sent a letter to you on December 3rd referencing Special Condition 28, and we believe that the applicant is in violation of this condition also. It relates to the underwater video surveys, which are not related to the quarterly reports. I don't think there's a dispute in this because they have acknowledged that they're in arrears, but we think to make the record complete, you need to go through a formal finding. So we're just requesting that this matter be on a future agenda.
Thank you. Can we add that on to Wednesday, or do we want to wait
I think maybe if we could put that on for the
January?
so we can make sure everyone has all of the information put together. I'm not sure we get the pack updated in time
For Wednesday.
for Wednesday,
Okay.
especially given that it's already late on Monday.
Yes. All right. So that'll be first thing in the new year. Thank you. Any other public comment on items not being heard tonight? Okay, so with that, we will go through the order of conditions for Sconset Beach Preservation Fund, 87 to 105 Baxter Road, SE 482824. We are discussing nourishment remediation protocols. We are going to focus on condition 1, which is the debris removal protocol. And I just want to remind everybody to please not repeat anything that's already been said and is part of our record. Thank you.
Hi. So for the record, Stephen Cohen and Jamie Feely for the applicant or respondent. And as I think what we're dealing with here today is a relatively narrow issue. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page, that we are proposing protocols going forward to make sure that there's compatible and clean sand in every delivery. But here we're just trying to deal with some quick remediation of the existing sand to make sure that it's as much debris is discovered and removed as possible. And so we have both protocols for dealing with sort of short-term and immediate, and also protocols for future deliveries. But we're not going to talk about the future today. We're just talking about the immediate stuff today. We also will be presenting, although I think it might have been sent to Jeff already today, although I'm not sure, protocols for, I think it's chemical and biological testing for review on Wednesday, which we're also not going to discuss today.
Correct. So just to clarify for Stephen, we did get that today, and we'll get that. I know we distributed it via email to you guys this afternoon when we got it, and we'll get it up and posted for discussion on Wednesday today as well.
So just to give you an idea of what we've been looking at, we've been trying to figure out how to sift through the sediment that's there in a way that exposes any debris that would be there in a way that it could easily be recovered and removed without being contributed into the ocean or left on the beach or whatever. And you can try to do that by digging through. You can try to do that by screening it. There's a number of ways to do it. You could do ground penetrating radar. The problem is a lot of those ways are not fast and could take a month or more given the size of the project. But Mr. Feely actually came up with a pretty good way that we think will get it done very quickly. So we want to present that now.
Just hand out a little outline of what that would be.
Jeff, do you have one of those? Do you have one of those?
Yes, I do have one of those.
And it's relatively simple, but
So basically what we would propose would be an acceleration of what we would generally do over the year. And so anytime we go out to the bluff after a storm event or after a delivery, we with the dozer spread the material across the top of the template, and if any of the geotubes become exposed in a storm, we go back out there and we skim 6 inches, a foot, 18 inches off the top of the template, and we push that. We let it spill over the 2 ends in the seaward face of the template. When we do that, if there is ever any debris in the material, it becomes pretty evident at that time, because now it's a very thin layer that's getting applied over the face of the template and on the 2 ends of the template. And so I understand there was a concern. I'm sorry that I couldn't be at the last meeting. I was off island, but one of them is, during this process of remediation, how do we keep the geotubes covered during that process? And if the process goes on for a period of time as we sift through it all with a screener, that could also be a problem. So what we're proposing here is, if we were to skim 6 inches, a foot at a time, and let it spill over the face, the surrounding 2 ends in the face of the geotubes, we would be able to have somebody on top and on the beach watching, observing all of that, and picking anything that became visible, which I think would be a pretty thorough way to do this, out, collect it, remove it from the beach on a day-to-day basis until we've basically skimmed through any of the darker material that's currently on top of the bluff.
and we would maintain a log of whatever was discovered and report that on a daily basis or whatever.
We would essentially lose that material, and it would become a giant nourishment event. And then we would bring in another 10,000 roughly cubic yards and bring the template back up to where its current level, which is kind of where we like to have it on an annual basis. That's our thought.
So I guess, for me, I'm just concerned about how long this will take, because we can't push material off of the template to start looking for this until we've done the chemical biological testing. So that might be a while, and I'm just concerned that this plan, is pushing that material closer to the ocean, interacting in the intertidal zone. Again, we can't do that until chemical biological testing has been completed and we know that everything's clean.
How long do you think it would take you?
So that, I think, is a question for the environmental folks, but I think you're probably looking at weeks on that and not months. But the other idea, as we discussed this and thought this through, was that if we did a huge nourishment essentially as part of this problem, that if they were exposed for a short period of time beyond, which would be normal, or through a storm event, we would essentially be contributing 10,000 cubic yards plus or minus as a result of this process when we got to it, hopefully in a matter of a couple weeks.
Is there that much clean nourishment available on island to you guys right now?
So there could be.
Is there? Could be and is there are different.
Well, there will be eventually, and the question is it available to us right at this moment, or would we have to wait, and do it in smaller portions? And so we're looking into, can it be done all at once, or would it take us, would we have to chip away at it for a few months to get to 10,000?
But the replenishment is not part of the requirement. We put more on the template than we're required to.
Right, but if this is part of your plan, it's important for us to know that this plan can actually take place. Is it feasible? I mean, if we're saying we're going to put 10,000 yards down, then that needs to be available.
Right. So, Jamie, if you were to go out there and start doing it, how long would it take to do it? Push it all down, including spring, picking through it?
Probably a week.
Again, I just...
Well, I totally agree with you, Madam Chairman, that, until there's been biological testing, you.
I don't think I can hear you.
It's not on.
No, I think you need to be louder.
Yeah, that's just, sorry. The microphones just go to the recorder.
Yeah.
I'm just agreeing with Ashley, and I think we're all in agreement here.
So, if I could make a suggestion, we certainly are out there on a daily basis and can make sure that there's, morning and afternoon, patrols to pick up anything that is exposed, and we can hold off on doing the pushing over until we at least have a confirmation for you on what level of biological and chemical testing you want and some kind of idea of how long that will take. And if you see that the delay is worth it, then we can hold off on doing that. And if it sounds like it takes forever and it's not worth it, or wherever that middle ground is, or the right place is, what we don't want to do is end up in a place where the tubes are exposed and the nourishment isn't being done. We want to try and balance both compliance and the impacts. But we can certainly get back to you, I guess, on Wednesday with a better idea of how long the the biological and chemical testing would take, so you can determine on a timely basis if this plan makes sense to hold off on doing it, if that's sort of where you were going with this.
Yeah, because I think there should be someone out there daily, getting what's visible off the front and what's fallen to the beach, but I'm just concerned about pushing this any further off the template without further tests.
Yeah, and that's fair enough. Our problem was trying to do analysis, technical analysis, or screening could take a month or more, right? and we didn't feel like that was satisfactorily remediating the material. You know, it would constantly become exposed, and you know, a month at this time of year is a long time, and we were trying to figure out how to do it fast.
Yeah, I think unfortunately with remediation, sometimes it's slower than we would like to do it correctly. And I think
Yeah.
it's better that we do this thoroughly than we try and do it quickly.
Right. Well, I think we could potentially do both if we get back to you by Wednesday and tell you, you know, that the other testing could be done, wrapped up, you know, within so much period of time, and we could do this right after. Maybe that satisfies commission's requirements.
My other question for you guys, so is this the protocol or is the one that got emailed to us the protocol? Is this the one you guys are going with?
This is an update. The problem with the other protocols was how long they take.
Okay. So then I guess my question, with your debris removal form, would that be the same? Yes. So I'm just wondering, can we get an actual quantity of debris taken out? Because most of the places you'd be disposing of that make you go over a tipping scale anyway. So,
Sure, but my question is, so far we've been taking pictures, and would that be sufficient to take daily pictures as part of the report? And there's, you know, there's some remediation that we want to do it in front of 85 Baxter, which is just south. It's, our ramp runs in front of it, and there's a lot of material there. And I think getting that cleaned up as part of this is something we want to do and would be helpful to do. And maybe we could do one and then do the other so that those two don't get
so
overlapped or confused with one another. But
I mean, we're here meeting about your template and what's going on there. I think removing from your delivery location, although it's part of this, it's somewhat separate from the enforcement. Am I wrong in that?
I think the answer to that is yes and no. I think that part of what you're asking is fixing the methodologies that the sand is going on to the template and being installed. And if there's a spot that is causing concern as part of the delivery area, I think you guys would certainly be within your purview to say that area also needs to be cleaned up to prevent any chance of putting debris in yourself, even if it's inadvertent. And I think you would certainly be within your rights through the enforcement to essentially require that to be cleaned up.
Right.
If you want them to quantify what's coming out of the temperate and that separately, I think that's perfectly fine. But I think you guys do have the ability to ask that area to get cleaned up of all of the pipes and rubble and brick, and
Yeah.
I think everyone would be better off for that being the case.
Yeah.
I don't, and Jeff, hopefully you can confirm this. I don't think that we need either an enforcement order or permission to clean up that area. If there's debris there, we can just go down and clean it up. And we're happy to share with the commission what's found. And I think what Jamie wants to know is, what do you want to know? Do you want a picture of it? Do you want a weight of it? Do you want a log? Do you want, I don't know.
I think
I think
picture,
log and pictures.
yeah, picture with, I think a weight,
log.
yeah.
Right now you're getting like half a trash barrel, a full trash barrel. Or...
yeah, there's not been much on a day-to-day basis. Usually it's what we can fit in a bucket. So when we do 85, that's going to be a massive amount of material. That's,
Yeah, so
Bucket, not a bucket, yeah.
Depend-
Bucket.
well,
Like a trash can bucket?
like a trash can bucket on the day-to-day basis, and then like Sunday after a massive rain and where there was an awful lot of stuff that was exposed, then we had bigger chunks of concrete. So in that instance, we did bring a skid steer down to get the bigger chunks off.
right, because what I saw out there was much more than a trash can full of debris, for sure.
Like for example, today was a couple bricks and a small piece of wire. So
But also we have to remember that when we're getting different size pebbles and things that aren't with the template, they're as well not supposed to be there. You know, we have to look at your, the nourishment guidelines don't say for rocks and pebbles of varying sizes, because I saw a lot out there.
Yeah, so that was one of the questions that we actually have for you is, clearly bricks need to be removed and pipes or wires or irrigation or PVC or, whatever the other kinds of things are down there. But, clearly some of the stuff that's coming from the bluff itself is the rocks and cobble. And, we're not sure where you want us to draw the line in terms of removing that, because generally during all the hearing process, it was considered to be beneficial to have that contributed to the littoral system.
Yeah, I mean, it's whatever your permit said as far as the nourishment guidelines of what was in the bluff, it has to match that. Because we've had sites before where it's like, oh, no, 10% of this has to be cobble. I don't remember off the top of my head what your nourishment guidelines were. Jeff, do you?
So there's
in here.
No, we didn't break down percentage of theirs. Theirs just requires that the material be bank and beach compatible material.
Yeah, I believe that one of the debates that we had during the hearing process was whether or not there should be a requirement to essentially contribute cobble. And I don't think that any of the permits that you've currently issued do require the contribution of cobble, and I don't think ours does, and I think there was some question as to whether or not intentionally throwing rocks into the ocean might even be a Army Corps of Engineers issue. Not that we would do that.
Oh yeah, moving rocks around is actually a very big deal for habitat.
Yeah, so it is an unrequired contribution at this point, but we don't necessarily see rocks, small ones, as something that needs to be removed. Although we're not looking to argue about that. We're trying to get on the same page.
Yeah, I guess I just wonder what percentage of the template we have that material.
Yeah, I just feel like everything's being made. I think bricks to pipe to 2x4s or whatever it is. I think whatever man-made material should get out of there. But I think if there's stones or rocks and cobbles, I think then that's part of it. And that was my understanding of all the meetings we had, is that goes in the littoral system, and that's a good thing. Not boulders.
Right, but at an appropriate amount. I'm just concerned there could be lenses in here that have a lot higher, pebble rock content than bluff material. And even though the bluff, has glacial erratics, there's lots of stuff in there. We've mined the sand from the center of the island. So where is this material coming from? I noticed a lot of questionable stuff out there.
And I agree, but I just think in the basis, I think that some of the natural.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'm just concerned what was done.
The amount, and like Ian said, or Jack, we didn't say what percentage.
Yeah.
Of that.
Well,
so.
we ended up asking the beach club to replicate the cobble coming out there, because there was an oversight with SBPF, and I assumed that the compatible requirement would have included a certain percentage of cobble. And so we're not talking about heaving rocks into the littoral system. But I do think that the closer it mimics the bluff, the better.
Right. Well, at this point, we're just talking about remediation by removing any man-made materials, which we see as fairly obvious: bricks, pipes, wires, whatever. And then the question is, do you want us to also remediate by removing any rocks that we find, which we don't think you do. I mean, obviously large boulders or whatever, but.
Can I just comment that for 7 years driving out there from Hoyks Hollow after a big rain or a storm, and there's any opportunity for the sand to get blown off the face of the bluff, there will be a whole row at the bottom of the bluff of stone. So I mean, I know that there's a lot of stone and cobble that's naturally coming out of it, and it's also been a part of what we've been delivering for 7 years.
Okay. I just know when I walked the front of that template and I walked the whole way from Hoyks Hollow so I could get a really good perspective of what was coming out of the bluff, it seemed as though there were areas coming out of the template that would have been a much higher percentage of small rocks and things versus, true sand sediment. So if we're hitting lenses like that, that is cause for concern for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that realistically, we know that there's mitigation material on the template right now that doesn't match the requirements in the order of conditions, and part of that is because of the man-made materials we've talked about, but part of it also maybe because of the grain size analysis. So realistically, what we need at some point, I don't think it needs to be in the short term, but potentially after the biological and chemical testing happens, is if you're going to do this type of pushing material off the template that you're talking about, it needs to be pushed through the correct ASTM sieve size so that we know anything that's not getting pushed through that needs to be removed.
I respectfully disagree with you, Seth. So when we lived at 99 Baxter Road, I used to take my children, especially my son, who was fascinated by geology. We used to bring back up from the bottom milk crates full of cobble. Most of them were about, under 4 inches or under. And so I think, I'm all for the cobble being replicated. So I think we need to address this cautiously.
Yeah, I mean, I understand what you're saying, that there is natural cobble material in the bank as well. We need to find a percentage that's there and match it, but we won't be able to do that unless we essentially separate what's mitigation material from what's cobble. I'm not saying we need to get rid of all the cobble, but we need to get rid of the extra amount that potentially got dumped there.
Well, so we definitely will remove all the man-made materials, and I think what we could do, since we're going to come back, since we're not going to be pushing it over, at least in the next couple of days and probably a week or two, what we're dealing with it is come back to you and propose that a certain size rock would be removed and a certain size would be left. And I'm not going to hazard a guess as to what that would be, but it's never been the case that it's only been, as Ian said, only sand over there. It's always been rocks, and rocks have benefit. So we don't want to start picking through, stuff this big. And that's sort of the whole point of my question is when we do this, we want to do it to your expectations. Okay, so we can get back to you about how to deal with rocks, and we can get back to you about how long we think the timeline for the chemical and biological testing would be, so that when we implement this, if you approve it, you'll know when it would start. Is that where we are?
Yeah, and I'm also wondering, question for you guys, are you guys willing, because I think it's important with the amount of different subcontractors on this project, that we have a named project supervisor who's on the daily log, so that someone's there every day documenting this? Because in a lot of instances, like when I was out there on Saturday, it was essentially random truckers out there, and I don't trust random people working on this job through subcontracts. Like, we need kind of someone there managing.
Do you mean for the remediation, or do you mean for everything all the time?
I honestly think it should be when this project is being worked on. Yeah, it's a big, important project.
I don't know if we've submitted it yet, but we were pulling together the list of who are responsible parties for different aspects of the project, and I don't think that that's been submitted yet, but it will be. But one thing that we can certainly do is treat it the way the town treats, liquor licenses, where there's a manager, of record, and that person is responsible for signing off on things.
Well, we kind of have that
Yeah.
in Mr. Feely for the sediment
Right.
sources, but
But
then who was there when the junk was getting dumped?
Right. So do you want to have each report be signed, or you have some notice who acknowledged it? Is that what you're looking for?
I think something along those lines. Yeah. Like, these are the 3 individuals we have as our project managers. One of these 3 will be on site anytime work is being done.
I'm sure Jamie can give you a list of who his supervisors are, and we can make sure that at least one of them is supervising the project, right?
I even think a conversation before the truck is even rolled out of the pit, just to say, we can't have this, we need X, Y, and Z, these are our parameters, this is what our guidelines are.
Yeah.
Because I think that's where it starts from, is right there, right? When the guy puts a bucket in the pit sand and starts to move it, that's when everything needs to be eyeballed and
But
stopped.
these people are being paid as delivery people, not scan sediment people.
I understand that, but
yeah.
that's part of this project, or any
Right.
coastal project, is that everyone should be doing visual inspections right from the moment it leaves the pit till it gets there. And then even on site, it should be inspected, so.
Okay.
So I just, you know, even if it's a conversational discussion in the morning, like, hey, this is what I'm looking for, we're going here, do X, Y, and Z. So
Yeah.
So just to respond to that for a second, Joe, that is actually, to some degree, that is how it's been. I think with now that we're in a world where we pretty much have to recycle sand from projects, that the new protocol that we put forward using a screener for anything that's not a virgin site is how we're really going to be able to manage this in a way that is, I think, to everybody's satisfaction. And it's another step in the process, but I think, you know, given that we're no longer able to really get bank sand, it's appropriate. And I, for one, am very glad to sign up for that and to add that step to the process.
Yeah. Maybe what Jamie can do is pull together a list of where the managers would interact with the project at each, you know, I mean, obviously we don't want to have somebody who's, you know, just following the sand around in the truck all day. But I think that having it at the site where it's taken from, at the loading, at, at the check-in points, if Jamie could identify the check-in points and make sure that there's a qualified manager at any of those check-in points on a regular basis.
And again, I think on site,
Yeah.
at the beach, whenever work is being done.
Right.
I think that's
Not
important.
just.
Not just checking
adult-
in, but really, oh nope, he's not just throwing the stones out in the ocean, he's actually putting them in the bucket. That one's really heavy. Is he gonna get lazy and make it disappear, or is it actually leaving the beach? Like, I really think we need that level at this
Supervised.
point. Yep.
Okay. Well, we'll pull together that kind of protocol too.
So I'm rather alarmed here because Jamie, you're basically saying when we had the original orders of conditions, from my point of view, it was sand coming out of the pit. And now you're saying that resource is exhausted, that you're going to have to be recycling. Now, from my point of view, I'm looking, well, we have possible biological contamination already. And somehow we seem to be sidestepping the issue of biological contamination in the future. And if we don't have every truck full tested, how are we going to guarantee that this sand is not contaminated going forward?
So I don't know that the pits are empty, but I think that's certainly not the suggestion, but recycling that sand is certainly something that has become more necessary, or recycling job sand. But we can, I think we should wait and see what happens with the testing that's done on the sand that's down there before we determine if there seems to be a high level of need. But also, we could put, I think the protocols that we're putting into place for the future, sort of have a choose as you go, and in certain cases there would be no need for any testing, and in other cases we would do deeper levels. And I think there's certainly in most cases no need for that testing, and in a lot of cases it would be either a good idea or an absolute requirement. And frankly, we probably wouldn't take sand where it would trigger that kind of testing anyway, because it's not worth the expense and the time and aggravation associated with it, or the risk. But the answer to your question is in the protocols that we're developing for the future as to what type of situation triggers what kind of testing.
That's a good question.
Well, it's a question of whether it's going to be honored in the breach, as has happened already. So I certainly agree in principle that it can be set up so that if it isn't coming from a virgin construction site, then it goes through a series of protocols. And so I think that's something we need to examine very carefully going forward.
And I think that goes for every coastal engineering structure, every project that's going on.
Absolutely.
Right.
That same standard. So I think when you got whatever you guys write up, I think we're going to take it and edit it and then say this is our standard, and then it's going to go out. Next
But
Wednesday.
also, going forward, I'd like us to take a page out of Florida's DEP, where they use a Munsell color testing for what the wet sand equivalent. And so I will ask Jeff to post that. Because I think at this point also color is important.
So I think that the commission has authority to do some of this stuff for future projects and for current projects, outside of this process and within compatibility definitions and clean sand definitions, and hopefully the information that we're providing you, in addition to your own research and Jeff's work and whatever, helps you come up with a protocol, like Joe said, that make sure that every project has the right materials. You don't want smaller projects that nobody's watching dumping, the bad material either.
No, that's very true.
Any other questions or thoughts from the commission? Okay. I can open this up to the public for questions, if you guys are done. All right, so I'm going to open this up to the public for questions. I just want to remind everybody to please not repeat information that's already part of the record, and try and keep your questions to the debris removal as part of this enforcement. So is there anyone from the public? Okay. And remember, please state your name for us.
Hi, thank you. My name is Harvey Young. I just have a question. It sounds like they kind of got busted for dumping bad material over the side. They were tasked with coming up with a protocol, and the protocol is let's push it off of the template and kind of clean it up there. I've been out there a lot, and I've seen a lot of working guys that know what they're doing, front-end loaders, moving lots of sand around. Can they push it off the end, the north end, and scoop it up and get it out of there? That would just be a question that I would have.
Thank you. I think we talked about that, but removing the entire template is probably going to have more damage until we know that it's contaminated with biological or chemical material. I don't
Or, damned if we do, damned if we don't.
This is not a good place to be in. I think we had one right here.
I mean, in addressing Harvey's point, if it was all to be taken off, I don't know how many truckfuls on the beach there would be, but I assume we're talking hundreds.
Right, and that weight going over the beach
Right.
and up the ramp at Hoyks Hollow.
Would basically destroy all the microfauna in the sand on a temporary basis.
And again, there's still the question of, is there enough mitigation sand to recover the template, once you took all the sand that's currently off, or all the material that's currently there off now? So we don't even know if that's possible.
Hi there, I'm Edie Ray, and I've been looking at this and have a few questions, and I'll keep them brief. I have a concern that both gravity and Mother Nature might move some of this questionable stuff off of the geotube thingies down onto the beach, and Mother Nature then will move them up or down outside of even, the project area. And I'm wondering if you guys have been thinking about that and have come up with some plan for them to look for these types of debris outside of the specific area where they've been dumping it off the bluff. I would also be really interested in not having this stuff collected and thrown away somewhere. I think it would be interesting to test some of the bricks that are very porous material that would have absorbed some of the possibly bad stuff that's from the site where it was collected. So I think it would be really interesting to see all that stuff put in a secure location and allow the commissioners to go and view it. Because as it rains and more stuff is uncovered, I mean, who knows what is going to rise to the surface, so to speak. So I think having it collected and put somewhere for people to look through, like the commissioners, I think would be very interesting for you guys, educational. And as I was hearing about the fact that the sand that they want to put down, throw it off the bluff, that area where they've been mining that sand is depleted, and they're now having to use the recycled sand. I thought, geez, when did they project that they would be out of sand? When they made an application to do this project, when did they actually say that they would be out of sand, or was that question even asked? Because maybe it's too late for this project, but for other projects, I think that would be something that would be really important to know ahead of time how quickly the sand would be exhausted. So that's just what I wanted to know about. Thank you.
Thank you. Great. I think we definitely did discuss sand sources. But I don't know that we had a projection of when the island pits might be depleted.
No, we didn't have either of the pit owners here. But I think the idea of collecting the debris in a spot to see how much was there is a good idea.
Yeah. No, I think it would be good to quantify what's been dumped here.
Just following up on Edie's comment, the fact that what we're dealing with, it's almost, it's like for years, no one was really paying attention. No one knew to specify the absolute, you only go from pit A or pit B or what have you. And obviously it makes it much harder to go back and figure out how to remediate something when we're not clear about what has happened, and it's been going on for a long period of time. So I think in terms of going forward, the more rigorous and strict we are with this project, it's going to be much more helpful for us, not only with this project, but as people have mentioned with other projects, to be clear about the source, the source material, if things are being brought off island, and all of that, because I think it's this history that we're dealing with which makes this so hard to get a handle on, and I think that's just going to require more documentation, more rigorous operation now, because, and not because anyone was failing to do what they were told to do, but we went for years without that being done. And so I think that's the main reason why we're struggling with this. But I think keeping to being rigorous and really clear and exact during this period while we're trying to do our best, and with the cooperation of the applicant, to remediate this for what is there and prevent anything additionally being added. So I wanted to just talk about that history point.
All right, you have public comment?
I do, but I need to ask you if it's okay to make it, so.
Okay.
My name is Barbara Bund, and I wasn't going to speak, but I did present information both to the select board and then here about projections for the need for sand. Some time ago, I'm fairly sure that the select board, at least I was at 2 meetings, I'm sure one was in April of 2018. These documents are in the public record. And I know I spoke here, and somebody here, no, I was talking just about the amounts. And somebody here said, one of the commissioners at the time, I think somebody who's no longer on the board, but I really don't know, said something about, unfortunately, that wasn't your area. And my thrust in presenting here was to say, look at the huge amount that's required, especially if there's any expansion. And I took numbers from the consultants for the applicant and said, if you take the amount they say is in the 2 pits, how long will it take for them to exhaust those pits if there is no sand for anything else? So I brought those figures and then said, and by the way, you guys need to worry about the compatibility of the sand. And and the select board needs to worry about wear and tear on the road. So there were issues for both of you, and all I want to do is make sure that I say, some of that's in the record, because I put it there. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Try and dig that out.
Yeah, well, still, we have no control over what the owners of the pits decide to make available.
No, and
So, but it's not, the onus isn't on us.
No, but I think we've had some large projects come down where they've had sand come in. You know, you had the storage container, you had the police, this building, the fire station, you've had the school, you've had other projects. That has been a huge sand source for them. But going forward, if we have a slowdown economically, where are they getting sand? I mean, this is a huge problem that's coming up. So we kind of need to think of like, where are they going to go? What is the next place? And that's not something for us to do. It's on the applicant, but it's something that's we've been talking about for years.
Right.
Yeah.
As a board.
Yeah. I mean, sand is a real global issue.
Yeah, I mean, Dave, can you speak on the pits? I mean,
Yeah, I mean, like you say, once the economy changes and their source diminishes, because a lot of the pits are using what they have for making like concrete. They're using that sand for their own in-house use. So
yeah, because Miles and Toscana bringing that over, right?
Yeah.
For concrete alone. So.
And I know we're starting to talk about the sand sourcing, but we should try and focus on the debris removal for this, even though having clean nourishment to refill the template is important.
So I could go on and on about this issue, but since you're trying to narrow us back to the issue at hand, I'm going to take you up on that and tell you that we will, on Wednesday, have further information and look forward to reviewing it at that time. Okay?
Thank you.
Thanks.
Is there any more public comment that may have been missed? Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Burton Balkine. I'd like to just further talk about Edie's point for a second. This weekend, the template with the amount of rain we had, I don't know if any of you had a chance to view it, but it was like mud flows that were into the water. So just to her point, there was definitely debris that was entering the ocean. It looked like fingers of mud going into the water, and I can't tell you which way the drift was taking it, but it is definitely something that it would be something for the board to look into. And then I had a question about I was trying to understand the process. They were going to push sand at a few feet at a time over the edge and then clean it up. And they're going to go, because right now, I'm not sure the exact depth, but I would guess there's 25 feet to 40 feet of sand on top of the geotubes right now. And were they going to do that 2 feet at a time until they got to close to the actual tubes? I was just trying to picture how that was going to play out with the sand getting pushed off the edge. I just had a question about that. Thank you.
Did you take any photos?
What?
You always photographed?
This video, we have video available
okay.
that we can send to the board if you like.
Yeah, send it, Jeff, please. Thank you.
Jamie, would you like to clarify how deep it is and exactly what you mean by pushing it off, if we're just skimming the edges or
Sure.
top 2 feet?
The southern end is 4 tiers tall, so the geotubes themselves are below the sand. And then it steps down to 3 tiers, about halfway down roughly. So we've never gone down below 3 feet of cover. And so what we were proposing to do was to go down through the grayish sand, which is what we delivered this season, and then get to where we started this season's delivery, which is roughly 10,000 cubic yards.
Do you know the rough depth of that sand?
Well, right now, the cover on the southern end is greater than the cover on the northern end by virtue of what we've delivered as well. So I don't have an exact dimension for you, but we would do it, when you push, we would push a very small amount over a long period of, the tube, and it would expose pretty much anything that's there. And that's, historically, we've done that as well. And so if something turns up during or after that process, we would have somebody there to pick it up.
And then the debris that's on the bottom, like, so you're putting, not debris, the sand, mitigation sand that's on the bottom, would you push that back up to the top? I'm not trying to understand about it. Would that just, you guys would take that away? It would just stay there at the bottom? So you're gonna push all the sand eventually that's on top of the tubes onto the beach?
Onto the face of the tubes.
Onto the face of, and onto the, okay.
And the two ends of the.
I'm just, because it seems like there's quite a lot of sand, mitigation sand that's on top of the tubes right now. Trying to visualize what that's gonna look like at the toe.
Well, it would expand the length of the project essentially by moving some of it to the northern end and southern end. And to some degree would build it out seaward.
Okay.
Until the storm came and
Sure.
basically consumed it.
Which it's supposed to do anyway, so.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
I can respond both to what Edie and Spruce had said in terms of wanting to sample within areas outside of the template and enforce an order that was issued at the last meeting. It does specifically call out that we're going to require biological and chemical testing on the template and then in the area from the base of the template to the mean low water mark, so the beach and the intertidal zone. But we're talking about that on Wednesday's meeting, not today.
Okay, RJ.
Okay. RJ Turcott, Nantucket Land Council. I just have a couple of technical recommendations based on the same screening procedure that was submitted on Friday the 13th. Intermediate action 4 recommends adding the language to disposed of off-site in a licensed disposal facility. And the same recommendation would go for sand screening procedure number 7. And lastly, the Land Council recommends that the Commission should require additional mitigation sediment to be placed to account for any material removed from the site on a volume-to-volume basis. So if they end up removing a lot of debris or some of those stones are very large, there should be an in-kind volume that's being replaced with proper mitigation material on the template. And that is it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Those are both good suggestions. Okay. Any other comments from the public?
Hi, Rita Higgins. I just want to echo support for project supervisor, and that's something that should be considered for future projects. But I think if I don't think we should be trusting delivery drivers to make the call, and I think there should be an expectation that if sand isn't appropriate on site, then it would not be received and it would be sent back. So I think there should be a supervisor, at least at the pit, ideally in both places. But I do think that's one way to try and avoid a situation like this in the future.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? Okay. Looks like there are not any. Any other questions or comments from the board?
What's that?
So it seems like we need probably to wait till Wednesday to approve this protocol.
Yeah, it sounds like you guys have some revisions that are expected.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll want time to review it, part of the public process.
Yes.
Yeah, and I want to read through Mr. Dunk's second letter.
Right. Okay, so where does that leave us
So
today?
I think at this point you would just say that you're gonna keep the matter
Continue
open and
this.
continue the discussion at Wednesday's meeting.
Okay. So at this point, we are going to continue this discussion on Wednesday, both the large debris removal and sediment testing of what is on the template. So biological and chemical testing protocols will again be on our other business for Wednesday's meeting. Yes.
Madam Chair, just a question of clarification. When is the commission going to deal with consequences or penalties?
So we're trying to rectify all of that right now.
Okay, so we're doing, we did a finding, we're doing remediation, testing, and then we'll do consequences?
Yeah, we need to see what the test comes back with. I mean, we're not sure. We need the whole picture. Right now. we're
Okay,
getting
we're just getting a lot of questions asking about, are there fines? Such damage has been done. So it's one thing to remediate it, but I think the community is looking to you to explain to us what are the consequences and what are the penalties for a violation that you have described and town council has described as egregious.
Yeah, I mean, through our process, the first thing that we have to ensure is that, what is permitted gets back to its permittable or permissible allowance. So
Right,
that's
we
what we're
understand
trying to
that.
do. I think that, we have had issues, many meetings to enforce with monetary fines. Our commission doesn't really have great structure for that. So that's been a long-standing issue.
I think, to answer your question, and Jeff can correct me if I'm wrong, but any monetary fines that, as a commission, we're allowed by state law pales by comparison to the expense that they're facing to remediate this.
Okay. I think then, just as a suggestion, is the commission needs to communicate this to the community. This is a public beach.
Right here. We're
Okay.
in here.
All right, well, we're trying to do that too. So there will be no fines. We cannot fine. The consequences are the cost of the remediation.
So I guess I'll try to clarify. So typically, with any enforcement, the role of the commission first is to obviously end the condition of which the enforcement action is taken and remediate that action, and then any additional penalty can be assessed based upon the totality of the violation and the facts that are involved. So I think Joe put it pretty well to say, until testing comes back and demonstrates to what level the violation may occur, it's very difficult to put forward a penalty without knowing the totality of what the violation may or may not be. So I think to say that there won't be something punitive is not correct, but I think having all of the facts in place to make that determination will be necessary first.
Absolutely, we agree. Thank you.
All right. So this matter is continued until Wednesday.
Yes.
On to other business. Approval of minutes.
Perfect.
So moved. Perfect.
Thank you, Terry.
Okay, so all in favor?
Aye.
Minutes are approved. Okay, reports, CPC.
We're having a meeting Thursday. No, tomorrow. At 3:15. Sorry.
You've got a lot of meetings this
I
week.
do have a lot of
Lucky
meetings
you.
this week.
All right, NP and EDC.
The same, we've got, let's see. Everyone's doing their year-end cleanup meeting, so we haven't had one since our last meeting.
Okay, so no new information. Mosquito control doesn't really exist. And then there's no other commissioners' comments.
No.
Again, I love spending time with you all. Administrator staff reports.
I'm gonna try probably to call in on Wednesday for that section. And we'll see. So, see my availability. It would just be, probably won't be for the whole meeting, but for this discussion, I'll try to get in.
You can watch online.
Maybe. I'm not sure where I'll be, so I may not have the ability to live stream what we're doing. I may be roll on the phone.
Joe will be fine.
What's that?
Joe will be fine.
We can
Joe will be
FaceTime
fine. Yes,
with
she
you.
will. No, Joe is more than capable, but I want to make sure that we get to
Yes.
a conclusion. It'd be nice to leave on vacation knowing that at least we've hit a point where
Yeah, a little more
the
solid.
action is going to be. But thank you guys for scheduling a special for today. Thank you. That's it for me.
All right, so with that, is there a motion to adjourn?
Yes.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, meeting is adjourned.